Welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Listen, whatever's going on in the world, today is a good day right now because I get to talk to one of my favorite people. I get to talk to her about once a year, so it is like Christmas over here because, listen, she is everybody's go-to legal commentator. I mean, her YouTube channel nearing 1 million subscribers. Also, her podcast, The Emily Show. She has a podcast as well, not just YouTube. This is called World Domination. Also, I want to point out she has a great web store, which I was just checking out. I was like, I need this Bring the Emily mug, and I potentially need the fax hat, which she is wearing today if you're watching the video. But we're here to talk Bravo, reality, maybe a little murder, maybe some court cases. We'll see. But folks, I'm just so thrilled to have my friend Emily D. Baker back on the show. Emily, how are you?
I'm good, Ryan. It's good to see you. I love that we can all just disassociate together and talk about reality TV, which we love, and maybe a side of murder. But I'm also bummed because November is normally our annual get together for BravoCon.
I know.
So this year it feels a little like, hey, our BravoCon is missing. So I am feeling like this was the time of year that we were all getting together to do something else, and I'm definitely feeling the absence of BravoCon this year and ready.
Well, I was going to say, are you doing that Bravo Fan Fest in a couple weeks in Miami?
No.
Yeah, I'm not doing that either. But BravoCon 2025, it is on. So I cannot wait already for that. And I always like to remind people, a couple BravoCons ago when it was in New York, we were at the top of the Gansevoort for this Bravo after party. And you grabbed me at one point. You said, you got to check this out. And Jen Shah was like popping and locking and breakdancing on the floor. And I was a couple drinks in and I thought, am I on acid right now? Emily, wasn't that insane?
I grabbed Ryan. I'm like, Jen Shah crashed the after party. Like, she's not supposed
she
to
wasn't
be
invited.
Here.
She wasn't invited.
We thought that she was going to be there because Tamara had said something about it on one of the carpets that she was like rolling around people's rooms at the Gansevoort. Like Jen Shah was like room hopping, grabbing drinks and like sitting down
getting
with
free
people's
glam. Free glam.
Yes, sitting down with people's glam, and was just, we knew she was around. So when she was throwing it down on the dance floor, I'm like, Ryan cannot miss this. And you know, Jen Shah, like reality TV stars can be, and like fraud criminals can be, is polarizing. But you can tell that people, even though the women on Salt Lake were mad at her, they were still pulled into orbit by her. They still wanted to know what Jen Shah was doing. They're like, yeah, we're mad at her, but she's kind of charming and fun. And so we want to be here, and she might go to prison, but also she's like throwing it down. So you could see the tension in the room of like, what do we do with Jen Shah? And some people were like, screw it, let's go have fun with Jen Shah. And some people were like, I'm leaving the room. So
I think other housewives were popping and locking with her. I think She by Sheree was there, and it was really wild. And you summed it up kind of perfectly about housewives. It's this orbit where you're drawn to them, even though at the same time, I don't think they're aspirational in a lot of ways, but you're kind of gravitating towards this. And some people can say, oh, this is in bad taste. But then there's another side of you that like, this is amazing. This is like a car crash in motion in the best possible way ever.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, reality TV personalities have to have a personality that translates on screen and makes people want to watch. And whether that is want to watch positive or want to watch because like, damn it, I can't turn away. I have to see what happens. And I hate that I love this. Either way, it works for ratings. And so I don't know how casting finds personalities that are willing to leave it all on the screen, because I would be boring and incredibly guarded and be like, do my chin look okay? Like, I'd be so insecure. And you've seen me in real life when we're both standing there being like, I feel so awkward right now. Jen's in the middle of the room like, move it, bitches. I'm going to drop my ass. I might go to prison. I don't give a fuck. You and I are like, I'm so awkward right now.
Yeah. You'll never see me dance anywhere. You'll never see me dance anywhere. Yet at the same time, I appreciate a good popping and locking. And you can only imagine what she's doing behind bars because, you know, she's there with Elizabeth Holmes. She's got probably a power crew. And we know from Teresa from Jersey, you know, I remember that People exclusive, you know, of the photographs of Teresa with all of her friends from prison. And it looked like Teresa was at the head of the table. And I do wonder sometimes, you know, how Jen is faring and is she thriving in prison?
I imagine it's twofold. It's got to be hard to be away from your kids. I imagine that your kids having milestones that you're not there for actually feels like punishment to Jen Shah. It feels like she's been pulled out of her life. However, we've seen Jen navigate groups of women before, and I don't think that Jen is going to be unsavvy in navigating group dynamics and groups of women. Also, Jen is charming. Lots of fraud defendants are charming. It's how, even though there are red flags, people end up being like, but they wouldn't, and giving them money. It is that, it is like they wouldn't. I've got red flags, but there's, I just like them. And so I think Jen can be very captivating in that way. I don't know. We've never seen Elizabeth Holmes on a reality show. We've only seen portrayals of her. I imagine it is much the same, that when people were in the room with her, they were like, you know what? She believes it so much that I believe her too. So I imagine that we might see some very interesting things coming out of the relationships that are formed. But again, it is a lower security women's prison, similar to what Martha Stewart experienced too. And I am sure it is not the most comfortable, but I am sure she is also building relationships. And it will be interesting to hear when she gets out how that has changed her perspective on things. And I hope that Jen Shah and Elizabeth Holmes and others are really looking at this as, okay, where do I need to reevaluate, versus them sitting around gassing each other up going, yeah, this isn't fair at all. They just don't understand our businesses. Like business. Why don't they get it? And it's like, ladies, fraud is not a business strategy.
No, I mean, and you just really hope and pray for when they come out that they are on that kind of straight and narrow on that right path. But I love that you brought up that a lot of defendants and these people in trials that you cover are charming, like Alex Murdaugh, charming. Like there is a charm about these people that you kind of gravitate towards. And it is interesting. I always say that blend between pop culture and true crime, which you definitely know about. And it feels like those walls have been like erased slowly to where they're one and the same for me a lot of the times.
Well, and there's so many of those pop culture cases that pop culture grabs our attention, right? And so a case like Murdaugh, it's like, wait, what? Girardi, but there's a lot of really suspicious deaths as well. Like what? Plus the South Carolina accents that were delightful. It's like, tell me everything. It's like Southern charm meets Girardi. Like what are we doing? So it really does cross over, but fascination with why people do the things they do isn't new. Whether that's crime, whether that's civil cases, whether that's, going behind the gates in Orange County, people are fascinated with why people do things. We like to watch other humans human. And so it's part of social media too. Like, wait, you're doing what? Like, wait, how do you do that? Or how do you clean your house? What's in your closet? We are nosy and we want to know. And reality TV scratches that itch, but so do court cases. You really pull into, wait, you did what? Now tell me more about that. And so it does go hand in hand a little bit in our fascination with humans.
Yeah, and it really does blow me away if you think about real life, like seasons of a reality show of, Jen Shah. I'm still paying attention. I mean, we just had a news story last week or 2 weeks ago where her sentence got reduced. Her sentence got reduced again. And I'm like, well, she could be looking at like getting out at the end of 2025, 26. And now I never thought in a million years this would be possible. But now I'm like, well, geez, maybe they will bring her back to Salt Lake City.
I mean, maybe they will. And those sentence shifts are because of things she's doing in custody. There are classes that you can take and complete that can reduce your sentence. So these are credits being given against her sentence vis-a-vis a judge saying, oh, we gave you this much time and now we're giving you less. These are essentially benefits and credits that she's earning within custody that shifts that custody time that she's serving. So those are things she's proactively doing that can help reduce that custody time for her.
Wow. We were talking before we went on today, and I was saying something about housewives. At this point, there should be some sort of FBI department just to watch any show on Bravo to go through, because I feel like, a good 50-50, somebody's involved in something kind of hinky, as Heather Dubrow would say. And you said, your dream retirement job is you're like, I'll head that up for the FBI, just sitting around watching reality television. I mean, it truly could be a dream job for you, Emily.
I mean, I volunteer as tribute. At some point, the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to be like, you know what? We need a reality TV division. Yes, you do. Tag me in. I will watch all the unaired footage. I will dig through. I did a lot of fraud cases in my time in practice. I worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office as a law clerk in their tax division because I've always been nosy, and you don't get the tea on people more than in the tax division. It's like, you're spending what on where? You've got extra bank accounts over where? Where'd that boat come from? So it's always been a bit of a fascination. But when you start following the money in anything, when you start following the money, you start to uncover some interesting questions generally, and not answers. And that's what happened with the Giudices. Somebody probably in the tax world was watching her throw down on all this cash, which she probably thought was a great idea. Like, I'll just flex all this cash. I buy everything with cash, everything with cash. And to them, they went red flag, red flag, red flag, pull the taxes. Let's take a look. And we saw how that went. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for the way people are sharing their wealth that can be hugely problematic for them, whether it is an issue like the bling ring, where people are watching you flaunt your wealth and breaking into your home, like we saw happen to Kyle Richards, like happened to Kim Kardashian in France, or whether it's the feds going, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on there. Your business doesn't exactly make sense. Let's see how this all plays out, because they can start to look.
I'm watching you on this screen right now, and I'm already picturing you when you're with this FBI division. I want you as a talking head on the show. I want you in like the Emily D, like you get a talking head on every one of the seasons, or like a potential extended episode where Emily's giving her thoughts as a talking head. But I also do this with Housewives.
This is why Bravo invites me to nothing, Ryan. You know this is why Bravo invites me to nothing. Bravo's like, we do not need her asking questions. Do not talk to the lawyer girl. It's going to be a problem. No. I'm teasing. I'm sure Bravo doesn't hate me. I mean, maybe they do, and that's why I don't get invited to anything. I'm sorry that I cut you off, but this is why. This is why you're putting it out there, and Bravo's like, banned. She's banned. We're going to try to show up at BravoCon.
Alert. We have Emily D. Baker at BravoCon 2025. Alert. Shut it down. Yeah.
Don't let her in.
Oh, my God. Do you do this thing with Housewives too, where you mentioned Teresa, and ever since she served her time and did all of this, I get nervous when anytime Teresa now still flaunts her wealth, or she goes on these vacations. I'm always like, okay, do we have the money? Is everything on the I worry about these housewives. I'm just like, I just hope that they've learned their lessons through the years.
I hope everyone has attorneys that they trust that are giving them good advice, especially if they are on probation, because those things are going to have to be vetted through probation. So it seems that everything Teresa has done going forward has been fine with probation, but it doesn't mean they stop looking at you. Once you're on their radar, it's real easy to be like, hey, I wonder what's going on over there. And in a new relationship, that hopefully was a conversation that was had of, hey, if you are connected to me, the spotlight will kind of turn on you a bit too, so you can bring other people under scrutiny by them being in your circle, which I think is what we're going to see play out in Orange County, aren't we? With Ryan and Jen.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because this last part of the season, we focus a little bit on Ryan Boyajian, Jen Pedrante's now fiance. And there was this Shohei Otani, which we've talked about here on this show, and I'm sure you've talked about it. But in the reunion preview, which is going to air this week, the first part of the reunion, and on Watch What Happens Live, Jen said that Ryan is completely in the clear. Everything is fine. There is nothing to look at here. Could you break that a little down for us? Is that correct? How does that even work? And, we saw his friend, I think his name was Matthew, who is up on these charges and potentially will serve prison time, talking on a hot mic saying, this is my bookie and I wouldn't throw my friends under the table. Can you provide any clarity?
I can provide what I think is happening. I hope it brings clarity, but
that is clarity with you.
I think the reason Jen is so confident saying he's in the clear is because what they said at the end of the show is that he was granted immunity. His lawyer said in the press that he was working with the feds, so he knew something. If you did nothing, if you know nothing, you don't need immunity. Ryan, if you see, you're in LA, there's tons of traffic. If you see a fender bender, you don't need immunity to tell anybody like, oh, I saw this car do this and that car do that. Yeah. You just witnessed a thing. So you don't need immunity if you just are a witness to a thing. But we saw those statements from Ryan's lawyer in the media saying, no, he has talked to and worked with the federal government and got immunity. Does that mean he's in the clear? I'm sure Jen would like to feel that he is. However, once the feds are looking at you, the thing that's going to come next, follow the money, is the IRS. So he might be in the clear for not getting prosecuted for being connected to Matthew Boyer's business, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a closer look into any potential back tax issues, because one of the things Matthew pled guilty to was tax fraud. He pled guilty before the indictment, well, the information was even unsealed. The plea deal was signed in May. The information wasn't filed till June. So Matthew knew what was coming down with the feds before they even filed it. That's not uncommon, by the way, that the feds are like, knock, knock, we'd love to have a conversation. It's like, look, how can we work this out? And then the deal is done before anything's even filed. That is incredibly common. We saw it in all of the Matthew Perry prosecutions as well, that a lot of those deals were done before anything was even filed. So yes, he has immunity for this, but no, it doesn't mean the ripple effects are done. Plus, having federal immunity doesn't necessarily mean that the state of California or Orange County won't go looking into what's going on, because there are both state and federal legal systems. And just because the feds gave you immunity doesn't mean the state is going to give you immunity. And so he could get immunity in one branch and then still be prosecuted by another if there's anything there. But it's clear that he knows something. How much of a something is yet unknown, though we know that ESPN speculated he was the middleman between the interpreter for Shohei and his friend Matthew Boyer. Both the interpreter and Boyer have pled guilty. We know that there was a big investigation into some of the casinos in Vegas to try to find this bookmaking activity that was happening illegally. So the ripples aren't done here. It's just whether or not those ripples will continue to swoop him in. I just hope he's been candid with Jen about it and she knows what to expect. But we'll see.
I really like Jen as a housewife too. And I thought like her standing up to Tamara in those final episodes, I thought was very powerful television. But isn't it, that's why I like about Housewives is you can have a scene like that, but then also something drastically is going wrong in their life, which all shows us how complicated we are as humans. So I'm very interested. I almost wish they had just kept rolling cameras right into the next season or season 19 or something, because I was like, we're ready to go, man. We got Alexis and Johnny J. We got Shannon. Oh there's so much.
There's so much going on.
A follow-up question about the Otani stuff. In the postscript of the finale of Housewives, they used the verbiage "full use immunity," and I was trying. So, what is that? Is that different than just regular immunity? How does that work, Emily?
Use immunity is much more narrow. So use immunity is only going to go to the specific thing that they are carving out. So that would likely be his activity with Matthew Boyer. That doesn't mean he's immune from prosecution from the IRS. It doesn't mean if something else is discovered to the side of this tangentially that he has full immunity. It means that it is for this specific thing. And with his lawyers and the feds, they would have carved that out. Does this mean he's talking to the feds? 100%. If anything is certain, it is that he is 100% talking to the feds and they wanted to talk to him, but also that he couldn't talk to them without immunity because there was something there that he was going to disclose that could land him getting prosecuted. So instead, he got use immunity for the things that they were looking into and that he was talking about. But it's not broad. And I think the reason it's use immunity is because the likelihood of there being tax implications is probably pretty great. Then again, when there are troubles with the IRS, that is not always a criminal prosecution. That can be fees and fines and like, oh, hey, interesting enough, these numbers don't match, so you need to pay us. But anytime the feds are looking at you for any types of money crimes, the IRS is going to be looking, and then the state of California catches on and goes, oh, wait, there's money? Great. And then the franchise tax board also looks at it.
Wow, it's teaming up by multiple government agencies, which is always exciting. And basically what they were saying that he was doing was kind of laundering money through gambling. Is that what the main complaint is that they were taking this money, Shohei's interpreter, and then gambling it to launder it? Was that what the complaint was?
No, for Matthew Boyer, and I've seen, again, ESPN is the one that said the individual number one in the informations is in fact Ryan, though that is not in court documents. He is, or
Scrubbed.
whoever is individual number one. But then when he gets immunity, he knows something. But with Matthew, it was illegal bookmaking. So he was operating as a bookie, which is illegal in California. So it was the bookmaking and operating the bookmaking business plus money laundering plus tax fraud. And he pled guilty to all three of those. The money laundering was taking the illegal gains from the bookie business in Orange County and then running them through a casino in Nevada to try to make it look like it was coming from the casino versus coming from the bookmaking business in California where it's illegal, then going into the casino, then coming back out. It was trying to reroute. There's lots of ways to launder money. There's a case I'm covering right now where a middleman in a murder for hire was paid with wet money. It seemed that the defendant in that case tried to actually
Wait, what is wet money?
Tried to wash it.
Like actually
wash it. Like actually but laundering means like putting it in the washing machine, and it's like, ma'am, no. So there's lots of ways to launder money. You don't need water, but I don't want to make people crime better, but that it seemed that that's what they alleged that he was trying to do by moving that money from California where it was illegitimate to Nevada where you are allowed to bookmake and what have you. So trying to move it that way. But again, they said that he was running that bookie business with at least 5 other individuals, helping him bring in clients from casinos in Nevada, helping middleman the deals, putting money into the bank account. So there are others involved in this, and the government likely knows who they are because your digital footprint is very, very hard to work around. And the government can look at, well, okay, so we know that Matthew is at this casino on these 3 dates. What other cell phones are at that casino on these 3 dates? They can start looking for who's interacting closely with him by digital footprint.
Whoa, that blows my mind. That is wild to think about how in depth that can all get. Well, and I was wondering on that hot mic moment that we heard at that on the finale, is that something where does the FBI like request this from Bravo, or were they surprised when they saw the finale last week and goes, "Oh my God, can we use any of this hot mic material right here?"
Well, the plea is already done as to Matthew. The immunity is already granted as to Ryan, but we've seen in Jen's case requests for uncut footage, and we've seen unaired footage used in the Tom Girardi prosecution. So yes, it is something that happens. It's something that I'm sure Bravo's legal department is like, okay, well, what footage are we turning over? But yes, it is absolutely something that can be requested in not just criminal prosecutions, but in all the civil lawsuits as well. So I know we've recently seen Tom Sandoval trying to throw his lawyer right under the bus, but that's something that can come up in civil too. If, you know, Rachel's attorneys are really trying to say production did all of this, then it might be a circumstance where they try to ask for all that footage to say, we want to know what production said to her. So anything captured, conversations with her in production or Tom in production, we want all of that as part of civil discovery. And then that gets fought over in court with Bravo's lawyers and whoever's requesting them.
God, and Sandoval just recently, I think, said on his podcast, is like, dude, they said if I said production was involved, they would drop all the charges against me, dude. And I'm like, he threw Mark Garagos and all of these big lawyers under the bus. And I was like, what is the reality of that situation? If it's true or not, and then is he liable now for saying this information about very powerful attorneys, Mark Garagos, and I mean, like Brian Friedman, these are really powerful attorneys on top of being the reality reckoning attorneys. Did Sandoval just get himself in a boatload more of trouble, or is that like something of like, wow, he really stood up for what was right in that moment?
Generally, settlement negotiations are confidential, so lawyers do not share settlement negotiations. However, Tom's attorney was also Mark Garagos' brother. Yeah, so there's that as well. But settlement negotiations, a lot of it can be, hey, what if this were a thing? What if we did that? So it would not surprise me if Rachel's attorneys went to Tom Sandoval's attorneys and said, what about a world where your client tells us everything they know about what production wanted, what storylines they were trying to run, and becomes a witness on our side. And if you're our witness, well, we're not going to be suing you because that makes you look less credible. So if you become a witness for us, then we are willing to drop our civil lawsuit against you, because who we're really trying to get after is, again, follow the money. Bravo. Bravo has more money than Tom Sandoval does. Tom Sandoval doesn't want to throw production under the bus, because what is he going to do? Is he going to go back to bartending? Like, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to keep going on tour in his leather pants. Like, he doesn't want to have to find another job, I would imagine. So does this benefit him? I think this is Tom being a pick-me and saying, look, Bravo, I've got your back. I'm not going to just say that production's doing this, and I'm going to stick it to those lawyers. And they're like, I mean, okay, man, okay, fine. If you want to play that way, fine. We will continue. If you want to put confidential settlement conversations out there, then we will continue the way we will continue. So no, the lawyers aren't mad. At this point, the lawyers are happy. And we saw Garagos make a statement to one of the publications saying, well, it looks like Tom Sandoval's lost his mind, because they're sitting back there going, if you want to try to play chess with us, you don't even understand the game that you're playing right now.
Yeah, he barely knows how to play checkers at this point. So, I mean, and to your point, just like the government building a case, they are building that reality reckoning case, and have now for over like a year and a half, if not. And I keep wondering if there's going to be some sort of conclusion or some kind of opening salvo, instead of just like kind of like little, Instagram cryptic posts that we see. So I always wonder what that is, but it would make a lot of sense to me of like, yeah, we're trying to build this case and we could use you, and it would be easy for you over there. And I would think that would be kind of a brilliant strategy.
For Tom, I think biting the hand that feeds is probably not his best strategy. For the reality reckoning, the amount of money it would take to go up against NBC Universal can't be underestimated. So I don't know if they are ready to enter into a years-long legal battle, because everything will go to court, then it will go to the Court of Appeals, then it will come back to court, then it'll take 2 steps forward, then it'll go to the Court of Appeals again. We are talking millions and millions and millions of dollars to go after this as a plaintiff with no guarantee. So it is not an easy thing they are trying to undertake, which is why I think we've seen so much of this discussed publicly, because I think the hope from the plaintiffs is that Bravo's like, yeah, we'll change these things and we'll just work with you and make this go away. I don't know if NBC Universal or their attorneys are inclined to do that, because they're like, okay, I mean, all right, go ahead. Because we haven't seen lawsuits against NBC Universal and Bravo directly. We've seen some come up against some of the production companies, but also it's the reason NBC Universal hires out different production companies. They also deflect their liability as well. So the thought of the corporation to protect themselves is extensive and a long game. It's much harder for those that aren't used to operating in that world. But those types of plea negotiations aren't unusual or weird. I don't know if Tom thought it was a gotcha. Most lawyers look at that and go, yeah, that's how that works. That's exactly what the government does. It's like, hey, would you like to be a defendant or a witness? Right? Right? And a lot of people say prison doesn't sound like a lovely thing to me. So I'll tell you what I know if I can have immunity, please. That's how that operates.
Wow. I mean, and by the way, what Emily was saying, it was so brilliant, but just to let you guys know what she's talking about too, is that Bravo, remember, they don't produce all of their own shows. They farm those out to production companies, like Georgia, I think, is a production company. And 32 Flavors is Alex Baskin's new production company. The old one was Evolution. Evolution produces Beverly Hills, OC, Vanderpump. So all of these people it's farmed out to. So it really does protect Bravo and NBC Universal, which is something that I hadn't thought about. Is it so weird that I know that we all know Mark Garagos's name? Like now, like he's even connected with the Menendez brothers. And I just think, like, how wild is it that like I grow up knowing that who Mark Garagos is, but he's involved in the Menendez brothers case too, isn't he?
He is. And that's somewhat by design for high profile defense attorneys. They don't get business if you don't know their name. They want to be the go-to defense attorney. They want you to think, oh, I've got this type of case. I need this attorney. So that is very much by design. He also represented Scott Peterson and was not shy about doing media interviews. Not all attorneys are media friendly or media savvy. He is. He's very good at knowing what he can say and can't say in the media and navigating that. He's also at this point very well connected with media because we see the stories about his cases continuing to get out there. So that symbiotic relationship works well where it's like, hey, if this is coming down the road, if you want to maybe have a story sort of ready to go, it's going to hit on this day. If you want to just push publish as this is all happening at the same time, there definitely is law and PR very well intertwined. And Mark Garagos plays that game incredibly well, but this is not new that his name's been in the media and that he is well known. So it doesn't surprise me that you know his name, especially, from the high profile cases like the Peterson case and now like the Menendez case. It's not a surprise to me that the Menendez brothers' families reached out to him and were like, can you help here? He's not traditionally a victim advocacy attorney, but that's almost the role he's taken on in fighting for the resentencing and or retrial of the Menendez brothers here. But that's the role he's played in the media. And because a lot of attorneys in LA know his name, they will take a call because they recognize his name. And of course, there are other high profile defense attorneys that play this game well too. So it's not just him, but his name is incredibly well known.
I mean, speaking of pop culture, though, I mean, Menendez Brothers, the monster show, still in the top 10 on Netflix. They had the documentary out. And then, George Gascon, the DA for Los Angeles, said, hey, we are recommending resentencing potentially. And then also it got kicked up to Gavin Newsom for a possible just to pardon completely, and that they could potentially be home by Thanksgiving or Christmas. Now, George Gascon just got defeated as the DA in Los Angeles. And I was just curious from a personal thing, does this affect the Menendez brothers? And are you shocked, or do you think, this recommendation of resentencing is the right way to go in this case?
Objection compound. No, I'm teasing. We'll start at the beginning. We'll start at the beginning of that question. Does the change in DA change things? Possibly. The resentencing hearing is currently set for December 11th. That is after Hochman becomes the head of the DA's office. What we know from Mark Garagos, because he shared to the media that within the district attorney's office, the request for resentencing is wildly unpopular. So internally in the office, there are DAs that would go into court on December 11th if that date does not get continued and say, no, this shouldn't be resentenced. Where Gascon was pushing it forward, he is no longer going to be in office. So could the new DA come in and say, we need more time on the resentencing because there is literally a new DA in town? Yes, it can, especially if there are not line prosecutors that are all the way behind this. There are three things going on in the Menendez case for the resentencing. One, the resentencing, with their case in general. One, the resentencing request supposed to be heard December 11th. That date might change. So do I think they will be home by Thanksgiving? No. Do I think they will be home by the new year? No. Do I think it is possible that they get resentenced down the line? Yes. So they have a request at the DA's office to resentence. That is the easiest path. But even that path has stopgaps. There are time periods where if they get resentenced, then the governor has to review it, then the parole board has to review it. So even if they get resentenced, they do not walk out of court the same day. There is still a process that happens afterwards. Then there is the commutation by the governor. Could Gavin Newsom tomorrow say, you know what? I'm not doing any of this. We're going to commute their sentence and then let them out.
Yeah.
Yes, he could do that. That is probably the fastest path forward if Gavin Newsom chooses to do that. I think he might wait to see what the LA courts do. Then there is a habeas petition asking for a new trial based on new evidence that is set to be heard at the end of November. A new trial is the longest game and probably the least desired outcome of all of this because all it gets you is a new trial, which is going to be A, difficult, and B, arduous. But maybe the hope is if a new trial is granted that the DA's office will choose not to pursue it and then they will be released. So there are three options sitting out there. And with a new DA, it's not unlikely that they will ask for more time from the judge to have that hearing.
Now, you also mentioned Scott Peterson a second ago in regards to Mark Garagos, and that's another, those docuseries comes up, it reignites everything, and, one of the Innocence Projects have taken on Scott Peterson's case, and I know you've covered this a lot, but where are we in that process with Scott Peterson? Because for me, like, I get the, easy job of just judging from my bed or couch with a big block of cheese and a glass of wine, and I'm like, still guilty, where are we with Scott Peterson?
Cheese and wine, first of all, is delightful. With Peterson, there has been a very, very limited allowance to DNA test new evidence. So that is ongoing. It is going to be ongoing. So the appellate process is incredibly slow. But since the death penalty was removed from Peterson's sentence and he was resentenced to life without the possibility of parole, it changes the lawyers he has access to. So actually the resentencing made it a little harder for him to continue to pursue these other avenues because the type of counsel he is appointed by the state shifts. But he did have, and that's why the Innocence Project LA ended up taking it up, because he had lost counsel due to some of his rights expiring due to the change in sentencing. So that is ongoing. We will see what the results of that DNA test are.
Yeah.
The judge was not hugely enthusiastic about opening everything up. So it is a very narrow door. I think that the judge, if my read is correct, I think the judge was like, yes, we will test this and then we will close this door for good. So that's really what I saw with it. Like, let's get the answer on this one thing and then move forward from there.
So he's got kind of one last Hail Mary here, and we'll see how that pans out. Now, if you can take your facts hat off, Emily, just not as a legal commentator, one of our most popular, beloved ones out there, what is your favorite show to watch on Bravo right now, where you can turn off that legal mind and you can just really just get in there and be just like totally escapism for you?
Don't make me fight with the favorites. I have to be completely honest. The thing I'm the most looking forward to right now is Traitors 3. I'm really looking forward to more Traitors.
I think we get the third season January 5th or 6th. And I mean, you got Dorinda, you got Tom Sandoval, you have really this kind of dude, and I'm just like, oh my God, please let Dorinda drink wine while she's at the table. Please let her argue.
I love Traitors. I love Traitors so much, but some of my earliest favorite reality show was Survivor and some of the other competition shows. So I really do enjoy watching, again, the gamesmanship, and there's more of a purpose and a goal. It doesn't, some of the Bravo shows, and I love Housewives. However, the longer that the Housewives franchises have gone, the more you can start to see people planning storyline, talking about the plans of storyline, who said what on what podcast, who texted who what. It's not as organic as it was, which makes the reality show competition style a little more escapist, because there's a goal and a plan and there's supposed to be a plot and you're watching it all happen, versus the housewife shows where it feels like all of a sudden everybody's screaming at each other and you're like, wait, what's going on? Like, what? This was a very big reaction to maybe something that wasn't that big. And it feels like the game that we're seeing on TV and the game that's being played off air is difficult sometimes to parse. It doesn't feel as much of a peak in the life. So I appreciate when the rules of the game are just much more upfront.
I mean, you nailed it, because I always said, sometimes a little bit of the joy has been taken away now that certain cast members on Housewives shows treat it like a reality competition series instead of a peek behind the gates of real life women, right? Like, it's always been funny, but it started off, like I always say, if you go back and watch the first season of the OC, you'd think you're watching like an Oscar nominated documentary, because it was like, just like, you were really crappy cameras, like just like fly on the wall kind of scenes. And now it is like a Michael Bay film that is so produced. These ladies come in with long lists of DMs and things that they've uncovered and spoken to. And sometimes that takes the fun away. And I will say even the same thing about Survivor in a sense, which I still watch and love, but we've now had a whole generation raised on Survivor. So they go in knowing every 47 seasons of this show. And it sometimes ruins the gameplay because they're just so focused on the gameplay that it almost leaves out the human element. So Traitors, you're right. Like it's a real comfort show. Did you watch the UK and the Australian version as well?
I haven't had a chance to watch the UK version. I've been covering a ton of trial, but it's on my list for the holidays as I'm taking some time off, because the trials that I've been covering, it was a lot of trials this year, and they're their own drama. So when I'm in it, it's trial and nothing else, as if I am trying cases myself, because they are very long and exhausting days. So the UK version is like, I've got it slated for the holidays, and I cannot wait.
Oh,
I didn't
Emily,
even know there was an Australia version. I can't wait.
Emily, the UK one you are going to love, and the first season of the Australian one is excellent. But awesome. That UK, you are going to love it. I love how you speak about that, because I think that's why we respect and love you so much. But you're like this method actor. Like, you get in there, you live these cases, and you breathe them, because you have to explain it to all of us bystanders out there. And I always ask you this. I think of like, could you ever have when you were working in this actual system, could you have ever imagined a day where you would be doing this, nearing 1 million subscribers, having to walk people through something that you studied and you loved and were passionate about, and now you speak to all of us about it? Could you have ever imagined?
No, not at all. And I think even growing up in LA, like LA is so competitive. Even growing up in LA, I grew up with people who were in acting, people who went into radio, and I was always like, well, I'm not nearly good enough to do all of that. Like, that's not where my talents are best. I think I need to figure out what I am passionate about, because entertainment is really not going to be an avenue for me. And I think also growing up highly neurodivergent, there was a little bit of really wanting to prove every single teacher wrong that was like, well, she's just, she just doesn't apply herself enough. I'm like, I am so ADHD. Can you please just give a girl a second? I apply myself really well. You're boring. Be interesting, and I'll apply myself. And so law school really fed that, like, be interesting, because the stories, again, law is very much like reality TV. The stories of what happens in people's lives, you're like, how is this even a case? Like, how is this real right now? And I'm fascinated by it. But when I went into the DA's office, my intention was like, this is my ride or die career in it. Like, what's my retirement plan? How many years do we need to be in? Retire at 65? Like, it was my goal when I got sick, when I got injured, when I had kids, and when my life started to shift. A lot of it was like, oh crap, what am I going to do next? And when I left the DA's office and went into consulting, I still didn't imagine that content creation would be a full-time. It became the thing I enjoyed doing most, because I like talking about the shit I'm excited about. And it blended getting to talk about reality TV, which my colleagues from the DA's office will tell you. They'd be like, Emily, how you doing? I'm like, did you see Jersey Shore last night? They're like, girl, no. And I'm like, oh my God, how are you not watching Jersey Shore? What's wrong with you? My colleagues were so sick of me talking about reality TV in the office. They're like, what cases are you working on? I'm like, she showed up with all her possessions in trash bags. Trash bags. You don't understand. Why are you watching the real
She
world?
flipped a table. She literally flipped a table. Emily, we've got work to do. We've got work to do. I love that so much. Is there a case or a trial that you've covered that, because you do put so much work and so much of yourself in there? Is there one that haunts you still?
From the ones I've covered, no, because I am not in them. Are we still covering most of them? Yes. There are cases from my career that I absolutely still think about. Cases that were sad, difficult, that caused me a traumatic amount of trauma. But with the cases I cover, I still want to know the resolution. The Karen Reed case, the jury hung. There is still quite a lot going on with that case, including today with arguments to the Supreme Judicial Court. I still am not clear on what happened there. A lot of the cases I covered, I'm like, by the end of trial, I'm like, I don't really have a lot of questions left. Like, I'm pretty convinced one way or the other what happened. That case has so many more questions than answers, but it is still ongoing. So I am still deeply invested. I don't think haunted, but deeply invested.
By the way, your podcast, The Emily Show, you were doing a Karen Reed update, I believe, this week. And that is the update, right? Is that we are at this hung jury moment. Obviously she's turned into a little bit of a cause celeb, and she's got so much vocal support out there for her. But you say there is just still so much left. There is so much to be uncovered still. And so we're still looking at potentially years of Karen Reed.
I think we are. And she did a huge 2-piece article in Vanity Fair, which is bold for a criminal defendant pending a retrial to do. There's a little bit of a Hollywood element with this case with Alan Jackson, who was a DA in the LADA's office and a defense attorney for Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein and ran for DA of LA. So there's all these worlds colliding with the Karen Reed case. And then it's Massachusetts and it's south of Boston and it's small communities and everybody knows each other. And then they start court every morning with the bailiff in the thickest Massachusetts Boston accent you've ever heard going, "Hear ye, hear ye." It's just the wildest thing I've ever seen. But the investigation used red Solo cups to gather blood evidence out of the snow. I'm like, what am I even watching right now? Like, script writers would throw this one away and be like, nobody's going to believe this one. If you wrote it, nobody believes it. So we don't have a lot of answers. The investigation was not great, to put it gently. The lawyering from the defense was excellent, and there just aren't clean answers. And then you've got a defendant who's like, I am being set up. And you have a prosecutorial team who seemingly won't retry the case, but the elected DA is like, fine, if you guys won't do it, I'll go hire Whitey Bulger's defense attorney to prosecute this case. I'm like, what are we doing?
Whitey Bulger? I didn't even know. Whitey Bulger's defense attorney? Are you talking about Boston lore? Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, and what's so interesting is that she has such a groundswell of support. I mean, like even in watching those, news shows about her, all of the fans outside, like cheering her on. And I just thought that's another interesting element of this, of like this support from this community that thinks she's being railroaded. And you have these police text messages and, saying stupid stuff about her body and like things that you're like, are we for real? There just seems like a bungling from top to bottom in certain ways. So it's really, I think that's why obviously it's been so popular with people, because there are so many different elements from left to right. And I always just think like, man, when I used to work a real job, I'd screw up all the time. So it's like, we always expect these elected officials and all that to not screw up. And then we realize, oh God, they're just like me at my shitty job. They screw up all the time.
I think there's like one or two screw ups that you're like, is this a screw up? And then there's this case where you're like, this is beyond that. And if it is just screw ups, then it is the worst circumstantial, linear amount of screw ups that you've ever seen. But I think that's why the community is so divided, because there is a groundswell of support saying, what is this police department doing? All these people are interconnected. And then there's a groundswelling of support for the victim saying, we need to know what happened to the victim. And we think that she is the one responsible for it. And so even within the local community, there's division. And then there's people in the middle going, can we just get answers about why this investigation seems so bad? What's going on? And then the more that comes out, there are other investigations tied into this where the same digital expert from the Karen Reed case missed over 30,000 text messages in another case that the feds recently indicted. There's a federal investigation going on into the Karen Reed case at the same time the Karen Reed case is going forward. It is a wild amount of circumstances. There are not a lot of questions. And some of the witnesses at the trial were horribly bad. Some of the witnesses at trial were very good. And at the end of the day, the jury was like, we think she should be acquitted on 2 counts. But then because they didn't reach a verdict on the 3rd count, didn't know they should acquit her on the first 2 counts. And now that's up at the Supreme Judicial Court being litigated because jurors came forward after trial going, we were here for 10 weeks. Are you going to ask us about the other verdicts? Because we had some verdicts. It's wild. I've never quite seen anything like it. And I'm still surprised the DA's office went forward on a 2nd-degree murder case on this case. I'm very surprised by that.
Well, there's your 2025 right there. Two more things quickly. Diddy obviously behind bars. I think they opted for a speedy trial and pushing ahead with that. Is there any updates? Are you covering this on your YouTube channel?
I am unfortunately covering Diddy at least twice a week at this point because so much is happening. Yes, they asked for a speedy trial May 2025. Ultimately, I think that will get pushed out. When they will ask for that, I don't know, but there's a tremendous amount of digital evidence. So I think this will be pushed out. We learned recently that the grand jury is ongoing, that new witnesses even last week were before the grand jury looking into Diddy. So the grand jury can bring in more indictments. So we're not done with Diddy. And Diddy's lawyers are furious, saying that all of these civil lawsuits and all of the witnesses that are talking are prejudicing his right to a trial by an impartial jury. So they're trying to get a gag order on everything. So there's quite a lot of litigation going on within the criminal case. And then there are so many civil cases ongoing. Some of those we're going to see motions to continue the civil case until the criminal's done. Some of those we're seeing a fight over whether the John and Jane Does have to disclose their real name and either sue under their name or drop the suit. So it is a tremendous amount of litigation going on. And there's still an appeal out there that Diddy wants bail and wants to be out of court. So lots. There are weeks I'm like, can we not, Diddy? Can we not? Can we not?
Well, but also I don't understand why there's not a gag order on anybody in this grand jury, because there was a guy speaking on the steps on TMZ with his, like, how are we, I mean, how is that legal for a grand jury to be speaking to TMZ or the press? That confused me.
The grand jury can't. He's a witness to the grand jury, and they are generally advised not to speak to the press. So I think the court's going to be interested in how that came up. The judge in the criminal case is not happy about that. If I were the AUSA and saw a grand jury witness speaking to cameras on the courthouse steps, I would have colorful expletives in my office. So I imagine that the AUSAs aren't thrilled, but there's only so much that they can do. So we'll see what the judge does. And there's this push-pull of rights because witnesses still have a First Amendment right. So when can a court restrain that? When can they not? It's going to be litigation fight after litigation fight in court. The thing that's so frustrating is federal courts aren't televised at all. So if you don't go sit in court, you don't always know what happens. I've seen the most wild speculation online. Somebody was in my live chat saying, oh, well, Diddy's not even in the US. He wasn't even in court. There's no photo of his arrest. I'm like, I was in court when he was in court. What are you even saying? I was there for the arraignment, mostly by chance. But so you can see when there aren't cameras in the courtroom, how things can spiral a little bit.
What did he physically look like when you were in the courtroom? I mean, I don't mean like, what was he, but like, what was just still?
Very,
no poker face?
Very still. And in, gray sweatpants and a black shirt. And still, when his attorney was talking, he was incredibly attentive at the arguments his attorney was making, but he was pretty still and stoic. But I imagine after being in the spotlight, you learn when the cameras are on you and choose how you're going to respond when the cameras are on you. He knew that there were people watching him, and by cameras, even though the court is not public, there are overflow rooms where you can be seen. So he knows he's being observed, and most importantly, by the judge sitting in front of him, staring at him while this is all going down. So he was stoic.
Well, this will be the best defense money can buy, so I'm really curious to see what their plans are for their client, and we'll find out more about that allegedly, potentially in May. We'll see. And then to bring it back to Housewives, to tie it with a little bow, let's go back to Shannon Beador really quick in this Johnny J. We had this lawsuit between the two for the facelift and some walking around money of $75K or $60K or something like that. And, Shannon wants to take it all the way. And I think there was like a preview for the trailer release saying that, like, I won. And I don't know if she's screaming at Alexa saying I won, that I'm not with John Janssen anymore, or I won in regards to any litigation regarding the $75K. Do you have any clarity on that? And by the way, are you a huge fan of Johnny J?
I plead the fifth. I don't love the circumstance we are in. I would have liked to have seen Alexis Bellino, if she's going to be back, have her own plot line. Like, I'm not really interested in the life of John Jay. I'm not interested in Alexis being a mouthpiece for who she's dating. I understand that he's probably frustrated feeling like he has no voice in all of this because he doesn't have a platform. But it was a very odd dynamic this year with all of it. But I can understand when you feel like someone's talking about you and you want to respond and the cameras aren't rolling for you, how do you respond? So like, I get it, but also it was really awkward to watch. But that doesn't mean he's necessarily wrong in the lawsuit. And some of the things Shannon said this season were, well, no, it wasn't a gift. Like, I said I didn't have the money. And he's like, well, I have the money. So it's like, okay, well then, is it actually a loan? Because then it sounds like it's actually a loan. And if it's a loan, then eventually you have to pay that back. But
a promissory note after the fact. I mean, it sounded like a promissory note after the fact of all of this. So, I mean, it's just so bizarre. I love the scene of Shannon like going through like paper receipts and going, here, this is $300 at a Johnny Rockets. I paid it right here. It was
I bought the
so
Ferragamo
insane.
shoes. I paid for the flight upgrade to watch What Happens Live or whatever. But that is not, those can be seen more as gifts. Like if you're flying with someone and you're flying first and you want them to sit with you and you pay for them first, that's not an expectation of being paid back. Different than, oh, I'll loan you the money for whatever the thing is. The court documents have this put over, but the lawyers have also said they don't think any further mediation or negotiation might help. So they're going to go through the court process. They should mediate it. It seemed from everything on the show that he didn't want to sign a non-disparagement. I imagine his lawyer said to him, and this is my speculation, that, hey, she's not going to stop talking about you on the show. You can't agree to not talk about her. And unless she agrees to a non-disparagement with money attached to it, like, hey, there's a non-disparagement, and if there's a breach of the non-disparagement, it's $20,000 for each breach or something. I imagine that's not something she would want to sign, and that's probably why they weren't able to resolve the issue.
Well, this is going to go on longer than the Karen Reed trial, I'm sure. So we'll get ready for the multiple OC seasons before we settle this $75K. And
do you think Alexis will be back? Are we going to get more of like Alexis likes to sue Shannon? Because it seemed like at the end of the season, that was the conversation. It's like, well, you know, Jim Bellino, that we learned that was what, a $300,000+ lawsuit. Like the reality of legal fees here is
it's astronomical.
Facts.
I mean, like that's real money. That's money that these people are really shelling out. And I do love that Jim Bellino referred Ryan Boyajian to his lawyer to send Tamara the cease and desist, which I was like, what a tangled web we have weaved with the OC housewives. But truly interesting. Listen, I'm not a fan of Alexis and Johnny J, but I do think they're interesting elements it adds to the show. I mean, you have to see Shannon withstand a lot of things. And I know Shannon was on Nick Vile's podcast last week saying, if she's coming back, I don't want to come back, which I always think it's dangerous when housewives start making kind of demands or putting things out. But unfortunately, that's the show, is conflict. I mean, you want to see resolution. So listen, I also look at it from a place where, like, who can I be the silliest with when I talk about? Who can I? And Alexis and Johnny J, it's like, I love to make fun of them on the show. I love to like do silly voices and stuff. So from a content creator standpoint, I do want them back, but it doesn't mean that I agree with her or his behavior.
Yeah, I imagine when Alexis signed on to come back, the intent wasn't I'm going to be a mouthpiece for the guy I'm dating.
Yeah, she has so many things going on.
Yes, I wanted to see her have interaction with the women, and all we saw was her fighting over the new dude she's dating, and it felt like junior high. It was like, well, you're just mad because I'm with your man now. It's like, we are grown women. Like, why are we fighting over this dude? Like, come on. We are grown. Like, that for me was very frustrating. I want to see the relationships of women, and women that aren't always well represented in the media. Women who are going through having younger kids, going through divorces, going through the financial downside of divorce, going through kids leaving for college. They're going through all these phases of life that aren't always well reflected. And what we're seeing is the most base version of bitch, I got your man. And I'm exhausted by it. I want to see the relationships of women and fun purses.
And I don't want to see fighting about podcasts. As much as I love podcasting, and I always joke that I want them to use a clip of my podcast on one of these shows. At the end of the day, I don't. Like, I don't want to be involved in these shows in that way. I think there's nothing more boring than fighting over a podcast comment. And I don't love that, it speaks to the success of podcasts, but I think we've got more in us than that. And that's why I'm voting Emily D. Baker as the president of Bravo. I'm giving her this honorary job. No, please don't. No, you've gotten it. There's no please don't. You just have to take it.
I'll be the official Bravo legal commentator, but it's really hard when it's like, you said this on this podcast, you said that on that podcast, because it draws the audience into things that aren't happening in the season. And that's why podcasts like yours and others are so valuable to me, because I can't keep up with everything everybody said. Who posted a story on Instagram? Thank God that recap those and share them in your feed, because I would never see it. Somebody's got to do it. But you're keeping us on track with, these things are going to come up in the season because we're seeing it. But then in Salt Lake, they're also showing us the way that they're getting into DMs. They're trying to plant stories with content creators. They're trying to plant stories with podcasts. You see the game being played, and it takes a little bit of the reality out of reality, because now it has become a game. And I loved early days OC. I loved early day New Jersey. I mean, that was real. Like, this is my family. Let me tell you something about my family. Like, that was real relationships. And when the shows have real relationships, there can be real drama. When it is a cast that is thrown together for filming that doesn't really know each other outside of filming, it's not the same as a group of women.
Yeah. And a great acting teacher of mine once, always said, like, show us, don't tell us. When you're having to tell people all of this stuff and catch people up on stuff, that's not showing us. You have a TV show. Show us. What is the actions? What are the interactions? What is that human behavior that initially got us so into this show? Finally, Emily, I love your love of Dave Matthews Band. They just got inducted into, what is it, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the Songwriter? And I just wanted to know what I love when you go see their shows. I love your love for them. What is your favorite Dave Matthews song of all time? And what is the one that makes you cry still? Is there a Dave Matthews song that makes you cry?
There are multiple. My favorite song of all time is Beach Ball. It is a niche little Dave song. I absolutely love it. I've seen it live once. It is rarely played live. And I literally almost fell down. My friend held me up as I burst into tears in Las Vegas, February 2020, as he played Beach Ball live in Las Vegas. I couldn't breathe. But yes, there are still songs live that make me tear up. It really also depends on what they're playing. But Dave solo with the guitar playing Sister, every single time there are going to be tears. But it's the music that I've listened to throughout some of the most pivotal points in my life. And so there are songs that, not just because of the song, but also because of what was going on in my life with that song. And then as the band has moved through their writing process, the songs, as you age and as life happens, and as we all grow in this world that is not always easy to navigate, they mean different things at different times, which is the power of incredible songwriting, that in modern music we get some, but not as much. Some songs are now written to be really catchy on TikTok, and yes, there's a place for that, but you lose some of the heart of songwriting. I love live music. I lean into going to every live show that I can. I'm blessed to have musicians in my audience who watch me on the bus and let me know what trial they're watching when they're on the bus on tour. And so it's been really nice through my content to also start to become friends with, performers and musicians. Because when we talk about it, I'm like, I streamed for 5 hours. They're like, we play a 3-hour show. I'm like, I get it. Like, I get that when I'm streaming to 30,000 people, that would fill this venue plus a bit. Like, it's really nice to start to build those relationships. And I moved to Music City. So when you go see a show in Nashville, it doesn't take me nearly as long to get to as when I would go to shows in LA. And some places parking is still free. I'll go to a show. We went to see Sum 41 and I almost fell over the parking. When we parked, I was like, the parking, they're not charging us for park. Like, how are we going to a show and not paying $75 to park?
Oh, dude, I saw Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks a year ago, $75 to park. I was like, what is happening here? I mean, it was a great show. Also, I love the thought of like Emily D. Baker. We could pass her YouTubes around like bootlegs. Like, oh, hey, you got the 2020, you got the 2022 Depp Emily D. Baker Wednesday thing. You got that?
Those are our members only. You've got that Emily talking about the Ringo lawsuit. That's in members only.
She played Ringo, you guys. She played Ringo. By the way,
very few learners who know what that case is. I'll tell you off air, but yeah, it's fun. So,
okay. So there, just to remind you, there's also members only, but, not only do you subscribe to the podcast, rate it 5 stars, go to that YouTube, you're probably already subscribed, but if you're not, welcome to your new addiction. And then honestly, just what we were talking about to any young people, a young person listening, get into a band now and just follow them the rest of your life. It's going to pay off in dividends in ways that you will never possibly imagine, because you're right. They are the soundtracks of our lives, and you'll hear a song over decades and it really does change. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about music. And just thank you, Emily, for everything that you do and for all your time with us today.
Oh, Ryan, it's always a joy. I love seeing you on SiriusXM. It's been a ton of fun. If anyone wants to keep in the loop and they're like, Emily, there's a million places.
Yes.
We have an app, the Law Nerd app, lawnerdapp.com. It's free.
Wait, how do you spell that?
Law, L-A-W, nerd.
Oh, duh.
N-E-R-D app.
I thought Law Nerd like L-O-N-A-R. I'm like, Law Nerd, is that like Maybelline?
I said it very fast. So lawnerdapp.com. Our app is free, iOS, Android, and whenever something's going on, it just lets you know what I'm covering. So whether it's a shorter breakdown on Diddy or whether it's a longer live stream on trial, it's one place for everything that I am putting out. So if you want to keep up with the cases I'm following, you can. 2025 is going to be the year of trials. So get ready now. We've got
say goodbye to Emily
Reed,
now.
We've got Corey Richens in Utah. We've got Donna Adelson in Florida. We've got Brian Koberger supposed to go to trial in Idaho next year. Lots of trials coming up.
Well, we'll talk to you in 2026, I guess, Emily. But you guys, I'm going to put all of that in the show notes so you can click right on the link to get that app. And yeah, I will hopefully talk to you when you come up for air or at BravoCon.